Welcome, everybody. This evening is Padmasambhava's birthday, and it's also Padmasambhava Guru Rinpoche Day. And every month on the 25th lunar day of the month is Guru Rinpoche Day. The 10th is Dakini Day. And it just so happens that we chose today to do Refuge. And it just so happens that today is Guru Rinpoche Day. So it's pretty auspicious and pretty nice. We're going to start with our opening prayers, and some of you have them. If you don't, it's fine to listen, read along. We begin with the aspirations. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings always be free from pain and suffering. And from Shantideva, for as long as space abides, as long as the world remains, just so long may I be there, resolving all beings' pain. And our request for teachings, reflecting on all beings, our specific states of mind, greater or lesser, will you please turn our wheel of Dharma now? This evening, we're going to begin working with our refuge. And the refuge for the Longqing Ningtig Ngndro is really a refuge based in faith. And a lot of us have done practices that are very logical. You know, we've learned that if we're in the present moment, we can meet the present moment with mindfulness, which is incredible. And actually, Asam Rinpoche talks about the inner practice being one of mindfulness and awareness. And that is incredibly logical. We're stepping into a very different dynamic, and it is the dynamic of faith. And our refuge is with faith. So for some people, faith is maybe a difficult word, and for other people, it has a lot of meaning. And in the words of my perfect teacher, they talk about 3 kinds of faith. And the first kind is vivid faith. And vivid faith is when we're just so enamored of the qualities of the Buddha. Those are qualities that we want, and we want to have faith and take refuge. And the other one is, so there's vivid faith, and then there is a faith where we exert ourselves because we want to be free of suffering. And then there is a faith which is called confident faith. And confident faith is really what we're looking for in our refuge for the Longqing Ningtig Ngndro, because they are dealing with something very amorphous, but it becomes more real, and it's something called blessings. And we're going to explore, how do we receive blessings? What does that have to do with our practice? And how does refuge fit with blessings? And these are different integral parts. And so we're going to take it step by step. In our practice of refuge, we actually begin, and if any of you have the Longqing Ningtig Ngndro that can be downloaded from the Dawn Mountain website with their blessings, on page 10 is something called Calling the Lama. And for some of us, we look and it's a title on a page, Calling the Lama. but actually calling the Lama is from a whole practice, which is called calling the Lama from afar. And this is a practice that I learned early on, and I learned it at a retreat center called Pema Ozo Ling, and that's in the Santa Cruz Mountains in California. And I first went to Pema Ozo Ling almost 23 years ago. And my intention actually was to take my daughters, my twin daughters, to the Dharma summer camp. And I thought that would be really a wonderful place for them. And secondary, I thought it would be a nice place for me to practice, although I did not know the teacher. And I don't even know if I knew what practices were being taught for me. So the first night when the whole retreat opened, and at that time there was a tent, there was a very large tent, and I was there, and I was there with my daughters, and the teacher walked in, who I'd never seen before, and his name was Lama Tarchin, very, very kind, wonderful person, but I had never met him. So we walked into the tent, and everybody is in rows and looking towards the very large Padmasambhava statue. And he walks in, and then he comes over to me and he says, "How are you? How have you been?" And very sure that he thought I was somebody else, I had to quickly think, do I tell them that he doesn't actually know me? Or do I step in for the person who he believes that I am and tell him that I'm fine? So I went for the latter, and I told him that I was fine. So that whole summer, I practiced actually Padmasambhava practice called the Lakeborn Vajra. And then at the end of that, toward the end of that retreat, he took us on a trek up a mountain, and we sat on top of the mountain overlooking the ocean, because from there you could see out to the Pacific Ocean. And we did the practice of calling the Lama from afar. And really, it's the invocation for Padmasambhava for Guru Rinpoche. And that was where I first did the practice. And it was very profound and very important. Later on, I was able to have a private interview with Lama Tarchin. I wanted to ask him a lot of questions. And so then he asked me something about myself. And I had told him that I had been with his teacher, Dijam Rinpoche. And then he said, "Oh, I recognized you. That's why I went over and said hello." So he was talking to me, even though I had never met him in this lifetime. And I look upon those kinds of circumstances where there is the teacher making a connection with the student. And so then from then on, we just had this most wonderful connection. And of course, I had learned the calling the Lama from afar from him. When I was at Samye Chimpuk, where I first met Azam Rinpoche, and he gave us Simchi, which was the one-to-one mind transmission. He would give us a break and then just say, "Go outside and do your practice." And there I also did calling the Lama from afar, again, sitting on the edge of a mountain and looking out at that point into a vast valley. So the calling the Lama from afar in our Longchen Nyingtig text is Lama Ken, Lama Ken, Lama Ken. And what that means is Lama no, Lama no, Lama no. And as we get to become closer to our teacher, become closer to that feeling experience of Padmasambhava, we really do feel that Lama no, Lama no, Lama no. And it becomes very heartfelt. And then the practice becomes actually energetic and a dynamic. So the next part of calling the Lama in our Longchen Nyingtig text, Waves of Splendor, from faith an open flower in my heart. Arise, soul refuge, my kind Lama. Coarse deeds and failings now afflict me. Protect me from this difficult lot. Arise, adorn my great bliss crown's wheel. Rouse me to become mindful and aware. So at this point, what we're really referring to are the inner channels. And our refuge is so deep that it includes our whole mind body system. But we begin with the calling the Lama from afar, the recognition of our inner teacher. And also what happens is that our inner teacher, and for example, for myself, that's Adzam Rinpoche, and for all of you, because we're doing this practice together, it can also be Adzam Rinpoche. And his energy blends with Padmasambhava's, it becomes one. And that energy, which has actually been latent in our hearts all along, begins to rise. And it rises through the central channel to the crown of the head. And the crown of the head is known as a very powerful entry point, and it's also at the end of our lives where we leave from. So we want that protection from the energy of the teacher, from the energy of Padmasambhava, who brought Buddhism to Tibet in the 8th century. A very important dynamic from the beginning of our refuge. The refuge for the Longqing Ningtig is so inclusive. It's so beautiful. It includes all of the paths. It includes all of the yanas, all of the different practices. And the very first stanza, in 3 real jewels. In 3 real jewels lets us know, as Adzam Rinpoche taught us, that the practice, although we're working with Padmasambhava, Padmasambhava has been called a second Buddha. Padmasambhava brought many teachings of many levels, Tantra, Vajrayana, Dzogchen, and so forth. But in 3 real jewels, we're talking about the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And that was taught by Shakyamuni Buddha. Are they separate? I had asked a teacher who came and taught in Portland, actually just last year. His name was Adzam Gyaltse Rinpoche, who was the brother of Adzam Pelo Rinpoche in their last life as 2 sons, and then the daughter Jetsama of Adzam Drukpa. And I asked Adzam Gyaltse Rinpoche, I said, what about Shakyamuni Buddha? What about Padmasambhava? And at that moment, I felt like I had a transmission where he said, one. They are one. And for myself, something fell away. It was not like, well, do I do the practice of Shakyamuni Buddha, or now I'm doing the practices of Padmasambhava? One. And when Adzam Rinpoche gave the refuge, he made it really clear that in 3 real jewels included all of the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. So our refuge is a whole refuge. And then in 3 real jewels, the root bliss-filled ones. So the bliss-filled ones are the Guru, the Deva, the Dakini, and these are Adzam Rinpoche as Guru, Deva Padmasambhava, and Dakinis are these swift acting, usually depicted as female, usually depicted as naked because it's complete naked awareness based in emptiness, who are causing what is bringing these swift realizations. A lot of times people who say they begin Ngndro, things start to go very quickly. Sometimes what goes quickly is difficulty, but that's to clear. Sometimes what goes very swiftly is unexplained understanding. And so this is called the wind energy of the Dakini. So here we have a refuge in all of the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, in all of the teachings of Padmasambhava, plus our own teacher, and also with the help of the Dakinis. So when we take refuge, we have an incredible dynamic going on. We're creating connection with Padmasambhava. Now we're creating our connection to Adzamphela Rinpoche as we speak. Also, and this is where it becomes so vital and so amazing, is that we begin to take refuge in channels, winds, bright orbs, this Bodhi mind. Who is that? That is us. We are taking refuge in our own innate nature. So we have the inner channels that begin to awaken. We have the winds that begin to clear. And then we have this bright orbs, this Bodhi mind. So our mind begins to transform. And we'll take a moment within our refuge to do something called the 9 breaths. Because with the recognition, and we're going to go to the next piece, that we are working with opening our channels. Now, why are we opening our channels? Well, energy flows, and this is how we receive the blessings. So when we have our very clear channels, then the blessings can be received in a quick and vital way and integrated. And integration is going to be extremely important. So we'll take one moment to do what's called the 9 breaths. A lot of times the 9 breaths is done before a practice, which is very nice because it helps to clear our different channels. Each channel, we want to dispel stale air, and we're also clearing our energy of the obstacles of greed, of hatred, and delusion. So we'll take a moment to do the 9 breaths. So the 9 breaths are, and we'll do them very simply. So the 9 breaths are, we put our thumb by our ring finger, gently closing over our palm. And then, and we're probably all on different chairs and different cushions, but as best that we can, we put our fists so that our arms can go straight. Now, the chair I'm on, my arms are not going to go straight, but they will go as straight as they can. And then and the reason they're straight is because the whole torso can start to open up. So with our left hand, we're bringing up, and we take the forefinger and we hold the nostril gently, and we are breathing in light and breathing out, exhaling, and I'm not going to exhale because of this, but we exhale 3 times. So we exhale strongly and then less strong and less strong so that we can expel basically the stale energy. Then we do the same thing on the right side. And we are breathing in the light and then breathing out our stale air. And then we do the same thing where we're breathing in through both nostrils, and again, the central channel. And so the central channel is where we're breathing out the stale air of delusion. So we're breathing out the stale air of greed, hatred, and delusion. And then it's said that when we do that, then our channels become bright white and light. So sometimes we might feel it, sometimes we don't feel it. And we can also do this with Omahung, but right now, what we're focusing on is the inner channels. So here we are in 3 real jewels, 3 root bliss-filled ones, channels, winds, bright orbs, this Bodhi mind. So this faith, this confident faith, is also the confidence in our own body. So it's in our minds, it's in our bodies, it's in our teachers, our gurus, it's in Padmasambhava, who brought the whole body of teachings to Tibet. And it's also in those who have transmitted the teachings. When I visited Samye Chimpuk, which is in Tibet, and it's an area above the first monastery of Tibet built by Padmasambhava. Samye Chimpuk is just an amazing place. And before I went to Tibet, I actually did not know all of the places I was going, but I had a list. And I went to visit a friend who was visiting from Nepal, and his name is Lama Rinpoche. And so I went to visit Lama Rinpoche, and I said, I'm going to these places. Can you tell me anything about it? And he looked at my list and he said, oh, these places have the power to change you. I thought, oh my goodness. So when I was at Samye Chimpuk, which is where we first met Asam Rinpoche, it is actually also the place where Padmasambhava came and met King Trison Detsu, who had invited him. And Padmasambhava came to subdue all of the demons who were inhibiting the Dharma. And when he was there, a very unfortunate thing happened, which is the king and the queen, her name is Queen Changchup, their daughter, their 8-year-old daughter named Pemasal, died. And King Trison Detsu was just absolutely distraught. And so Padmasambhava was there, and what he did was he revived her for a very short time, and he put teachings called the Kanjra Nintig into her mind, and then she died. 2 lifetimes later, Princess Pemasal became Longchen Rabjam. King Trison Detsun was incarnated as Jigme Lingpa. And then many years after that, Asam Pelu Rinpoche incarnated as Jigme Lingpa. So the practices that we're doing, which come through an amazing lineage, Padmasambhava, Longchenpa, Yeshe Sogyal, and also Jigme Lingpa. So this is the Longchen Nyingtig Ngndro, which was shortened for us by the incarnation of Jigme Lingpa into the waves of splendor. So after we do in 3 real jewels, 3 root bliss-filled ones, channels, winds, bright orbs, this Bodhi mind, essence, nature, moving love Mandell. Now this is the wisdom nature. This is our true essence. And the moving love Mandell is our mind. Incredible. All-inclusive refuge that we do. And until full Bodhi, I take refuge. So we have a visualization that goes along with this, and it's called the refuge tree. And it's said that the refuge tree can fill all of space. And the refuge tree has Padmasambhava, Yeshe Sogyal, and then above them is Jigme Lingpa, Longchen Rabjam, and Padmasambhava, Vajrasattva, and it keeps going up to Samantabhadra. Right now, I know there's some people just learning the practice. So right now we're going to stay focused on the visualization of Padmasambhava Yeshe Sogyal, very nice. And also knowing that in our hearts, what has arisen to the top of our head is the energy of Asam Rinpoche merging with Padmasambhava, going through the top of our head, and then in conjunction with Yeshe Sogyal. So it's quite powerful, and it's a visualization that we use. And this is a dynamic. It's the dynamic interplay of our own intentionality, our own positivity, who we really are, and our aspiration. As we are with this visualization, we have our male relatives on our right, our female relatives on our left, enemies before us, and everyone else, friends and so forth, behind us, so that we're all taking refuge together. No one's left out. So as we're all taking refuge together, it also does something very incredible in the mind, that really it's all joined together. It's all joined together as one. And so we're unified in that way. We're not thinking, oh, do I really want to put this person in my refuge? And also on the refuge tree, we can include past heartfelt teachers. We can include people who've been spiritual mentors. And although the refuge tree is very specific, we ourselves can include that because there have been many important people on all of our paths. So we again use this practice of light. So our energy as we're taking refuge goes as a light into the refuge tree. It goes into the refuge tree, and by incredible grace, we're brought into the heart of Padmasambhava. Incredible. And we rest there. We hang out. And we spend a little time with this refuge. And then the refuge tree all blends into the heart of Padmasambhava, into our heart. And then once again, due to interdependence, we reappear and the refuge tree reappears. So the light from the refuge tree invites us, we join with the refuge tree, we're one with the refuge tree, and then with that magical interdependence, we are back. I love that in Tibetan Buddhism, there is a lot of becoming and dissolving. And this is one of those times. So we have worked with calling the Lama from afar, and we have worked with the refuge. And it's important to get to know all of these different people. So there's a very lovely book called White Lotus, which describes the 7-line prayer. And the 7-line prayer is a prayer that Padmasambhava said, when he hears the 7-line prayer, he will come. So this evening, we're going to do the 7-line prayer. So I'll read it first, and I believe that many of you have a copy of the 7-line prayer. Whom, which is a seed syllable. Organ Yolji Nubjam Sam. Pema Gesar Dungpo La. Yatsen Choji Nubdru Ne. Pema Jungne Zesu Drag. Kordu Kadro Mangpo Kor. Keiki Jesu Dagdrub Ji. Jinji Labjir Shegsu Sol. Guru Pema City Hung. Northwest Oregon's border there, on a blooming lotus stem, powers amazing and supreme, widely known as Lotus Born. With dakinis all around, I do practice as you did. Please bring on your waves of splendor. Guru, bring me cities home. So for those of you unfamiliar with Padmasambhava, this reference to on a blooming lotus stem. One of the stories of Padmasambhava is that he was born in a lotus, and he was born becoming 8 years old sitting in a lotus. And so we refer to him as the lotus born. And for those of you who are reading Words of My Perfect Teacher, we read that whenever we hear the 7-line prayer, whenever Padmasambhava is called upon, that he will sleep at your doorstep, which is kind of nice. And again, we might, for those of you unfamiliar with Padmasambhava, we might recognize that this was a very great teacher who brought teachings to Tibet, who faced a lot of challenges. At one point, they tried to burn him at the stake, and of course it didn't work. And he had lots of challenges in taming what were called the demons at the time to rid Tibet of great obstacles. But what's most important is that we have an unbroken lineage, and it was brought to us by Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava. I remember when I had received so many teachings, and I had so many teachings, I actually did not know what to do with them all. And so I decided that there was a very great teacher named Namkar Drime Rinpoche, and that I would have an arrow divination from him. And so I had an arrow divination from him. And one of my questions was, I have so many teachings, I actually don't know what to do with them all. And so from his arrow divination, he said, your next training is the Longchen Nyingtig. So I had actually just started to learn the Longchen Nyingtig and was just starting the Ngndro. And for me, it brought everything together, because as Mpelu Rinpoche says, that our refuge includes the 9 yanas. It includes all of the teachings of the Buddha. It includes all of the teachings of Padmasambhava. And when Longchenpa was alive, what he did was he not only had the impression put into him of the Kanjo Nyingtig, but he went and he collected and learned all of the practices, and he codified them, which is just unbelievable in and of itself. And many of them are in something called the 7 Treasuries, and it's published by Padma Publishing. And that's where the book that Choyang Zhu is part of. So we have these collected practices that have been passed down through Longchenpa, and then was downloaded to Jigme Lingpa, with Jigme Lingpa's aspiration, heartfelt aspiration to awaken. And so what he awakened to was the entire lineage of Longchenpa, and then he subsequently gave those teachings and to many, and now we have them. So we're very blessed to have just such a dynamic refuge, and at the same time, so simple. So all of the things that I've described, you don't even need to think about. Just the 7-line prayer, Organ Yulji Nub Jam Sam, Pema Ge Sardong Po La, Yatsen Choji Nub Jumne, Pema Jungne Ze Sudrag, Kordu Kadro Mangpo Kor, Keiki Je Sudag Jubji, Jinji Labjir Sheg Su Sol, Guru Pema Siddhi Hong. And then our refuge that we just did in 3 real jewels, 3 roots, Sugatas, channels, winds, bright orbs, this Bodhi mind, essence, nature, heart, move, mandala, until full Bodhi, I seek refuge. So that is our refuge. And our path begins to go quickly. And some people call the Ngndro, oh, it's a time to work through obstacles. Well, it is. But it's also a time to learn what blessings are. So the blessings are many. And when we work with the opening of the channels, the taking of refuge, then the blessings begin to come. And so, yes, it's blessings. Yes, we bring up all kinds of things for ourselves that it's called the cleansing. But we also will in the future work with Vajrasattva, which helps with purification, and it will help us on our path. So all of the different components of the Ngndro will help us on our path. I know I faced quite an obstacle, just to share, when I went on retreat, a 3-week retreat, which was with Chaduk Rinpoche, and it was called the Yabzi, the Ningtig Yabzi. And so I was there for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden, and we were doing practice day and night. We would go till like 11 o'clock at night. And all of a sudden I felt like my eye was swelling. And then people started coming up to me and said, your eye doesn't look very good. And I said, I know. And I happened to be sitting and made friends with a group of people from Taiwan. And one of them was a doctor. And he said, I'm really worried about your eye. And although it was in a remote area, there were people going into town to get medicine for my eye. So my eye got swollen so big, it was hard to believe that it was still with me. And they took me up to see Chaduk Rinpoche, who blew on my eye. It was known to be a healer. And finally, my eye was not getting better. But one of the people who sat next to the doctor from Taiwan, he said, I am tired of looking at your eye. And he said, I am going to cure your eye. And so he went out, and he was a woodsman, and he got a stick and he sharpened it, and they purified it, and he lanced my eye. And then as soon as that happened, different people came up to me and said, we believe your view has changed. And so the view is called the view of the absolute, the view of Dzogchen. And it was very symbolic. It was very intense. And at the same time, it was all protected. So we do go through things. And we also find ourselves in circumstances that sometimes seem awkward. I went to the very last teachings when the last time I saw Chaduk Rinpoche, and before he died, and right before I was studying with Azam Pebelu Rinpoche, and it was called his Heart Teachings. And we arrived late, and I was sitting in the back of the room. But all of a sudden, somebody from the front of the room came to the back of the room and said, hello. And it was somebody who had organized teachings for me years before, and she had become a nun. And she said, I want you to come and sit in the front next to me. And I said, well, that's fine. I don't always know what page we're on. Would you know what page we're on? She said, oh, yes. So when I got up to the front, there actually was no room next to her. The only room was at the foot of Chaduk Rinpoche, and the room was packed. So I sat before him being very uncomfortable because I did not know all of the practices. I did not know the pages we were on, but there I was. And occasionally he would look down at me. And there was no room at this retreat. And so I was sleeping in the shrine room and I was sitting at his feet. By the end of the retreat, although I did not feel that my practice had gone very well at all, I started to have these very important understandings for me. And I realized that it was all through aspiration, doing the 7-line prayer, which I had memorized, calling upon Padmasambhava, and receiving blessings. So our paths can have very circuitous routes, but our refuge, and that confident refuge, is what stays with us. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to our teachings with Lama Jacqueline Mandel this evening. We will be heading into questions and answers, but before we do that, I would like to go ahead and lead us in a dedication for everything that we have received, so that we can dedicate it to everyone in the world right now who's in need of these blessings, and for our own enlightenment and to become of benefit for all beings. By this good may I swiftly once become a great guru, lead all beings, everyone, to reach to that very ground.